Welcome. We often hear that carbon dioxide is a plant food and therefore very beneficial. But there are also circumstances where carbon dioxide can harm plants. And we're going to take a look at that today. So the question is carbon dioxide a plant food or a plant poison? Or, of course, both? We often hear, and we need more food for a growing population. This does ignore the fact that unless there's more nutrients in that food that's grown, you have to eat more of it to get yourself the amount of nutrients you need. It was also said that it is greening the earth, and in parts of the world, in fact, it is greening the earth. But this doesn't mention that there are also other parts of the world where it's browning them. Everybody likes to be warm. That's not strictly true. I don't particularly like to be hot. Anyway, you can escape being a cold by just wrapping up some more. You can't escape from being too hot once you've taken off the last layer of clothing. It's making winters warmer, and so there are fewer deaths. That is strictly not true either. Yes, more people die during the winter than during the summer, but the death rate from extreme heat is much higher than the death rate from extreme cold. Plant growth is due to something called photosynthesis, but carbon dioxide is not the only factor that affects photosynthesis. The type of plant is important for a start, the amount of sunlight it gets, the temperature in the ambient environment, the availability of water, and then, and only then, the availability of carbon dioxide. So let's take a look at this in more detail. There are basically three types of plants. C3 plants, which are about 85% of all plants, they like cool, wet environments. These are things like rice, wheat, soybeans, and trees. They have a particular way of achieving photosynthesis. The next type is C4 plants. They tend to like hotter weather and sunny environments. This would be something like corn. The third type of plants are CAM plants, which have adapted to arid environments. These are things like cacti, succulents, and pineapples. And they have yet another way of dealing with photosynthesis. The requirements of each sort of these plants is very different one from another. Let's first consider the role of sunlight in photosynthesis. The sun supplies the energy for photosynthesis, and so one would think more sunlight, more photosynthesis, and up to a point that is correct. But after that point, it actually sort of flattens out and makes very little difference the more sunlight you add. In fact, actually it can be very plant specific. As you know, some plants like to grow in the sun, others like to grow in the shade, others like a mixture of the two. Some grow in the spring when the sun is weaker than in the summer, and so on. So this is a complicated problem. It's not as simple as a lot of people make out. The ambient temperature is another factor that's often forgotten in these sorts of discussions. There is an optimum growing temperature for each plant, and the higher the temperature, at least initially, the more the plant will grow. However, beyond a certain point, that process is reversed, and the higher the temperature is, the slower the plant grows, eventually killing it. Again, this is plant specific. Some plants like hot weather, other plants like cool weather. And you have to understand which combination of all these factors is optimum for the particular plant you're talking about. The optimum growing temperature varies by plant type. For example, C3 plants lose growth rate after about 17 degrees centigrade, which is rather worrying because the average global temperature a couple of months ago was 17 degrees centigrade. So if it starts going up higher than that, then a large number of plants are not going to be so efficient at growing as they were before. C4 plants like warmer temperatures, and their growth rate continues to a maximum of about 27 degrees centigrade, beyond which it falls off very rapidly as well. Again, something that's forgotten in many of these discussions is soil moisture. Plants subject to a long drought will die. If it's moisture deficient, it will not grow very well. Obviously, optimum level of moisture, it will grow as well as it can. But then if you get too much moisture, it will drown and die as well. So you can have too much of a good thing. Here we have a plot of soil moisture against temperature. Here we have a plot of soil moisture against photosynthesis rate. And you can see for high moisture content in the soil, the rate of growth is approximately constant. However, if you drop below something like 10 to 15% soil moisture, then the rate of growth drops off radically. And so the plant will not grow anything like as efficiently as it did before. You can go down to 5% and it's growing at 1/4 of the rate that it would at 15%. So this is a very important factor and something that's often forgotten in all of these discussions. Now, one of the problems is, of course, that high temperatures rob the soil of moisture. There's more evaporation from the soil, so the plants are operating in a stress condition under those sorts of conditions and don't grow as well. Here is a plot of soil temperature against soil moisture for different months of the year, and you can see that once the temperature gets up in the 20s for some plants, you'll find that the soil moisture content drops down to very, very low values and therefore will stress the plant. Well, okay, let's get down to the nub of the situation. Does more carbon dioxide imply more photosynthesis and more plant growth? Again, initially it does. However, as you add more carbon dioxide, it tends to limit out to a particular level. And in fact, actually, if you go far enough, it'll start to go back down again. So just adding more and more carbon dioxide, doubling it or tripling it or whatever, doesn't do you very much good. The other thing is, over time, the plants adapt. They don't want to grow into huge bushes that they can't support themselves with, that the first wind is going to knock down. They will try to absorb less carbon dioxide and grow to their natural size, which is the way they're most weather resistant. And again, all of this is very plant specific. Then there's the old chestnut that below 170, I've even heard 150 parts per million, everything dies. So we can't remove all the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Not that anybody is proposing to do so, by the way. However, you can actually look at the plant growth rates for both C3s and C4 plants and see that this is utter nonsense. Here is various plants grown at different levels of carbon dioxide. The top one is a C3 plant, which is rice. And you can see it's sort of still growing at between 70 and 100 parts per million. That's well below the 170 that they're talking about. And Setaria vidaris, which is actually a type of millet, will grow all the way down to 30 parts per million. Now, yes, they're stunted. It's not quite as productive, but it will still grow. It doesn't die. There are lots of other factors that one has to take into account, like the type of soil that the plant is in. Is it sandy and well drained, or is it clay-like and holds onto the water well? Is there lots of nutrients in the soil, or is it nutrient poor? What about pollution of the soil, of the water, and of the air? All of those are problems to plants. Natural disasters like wildfires and flooding can kill plants. So these factors have to be taken into account. I don't really have time to go and quantify those at this particular point. So what conclusions can we draw from all of this? Carbon dioxide is indeed a plant food, but it's not as simple as some people make it out to be. Adding more, particularly a lot more, does little to help the plants. And there is no lower limit on carbon dioxide level. So we can go below 170 or 150 or even 100, and most of the crops will still continue to grow. They won't die. Sunlight, which is an important factor, is affected by clouds. Cloud is affected by evaporation rates from the oceans, and the higher the temperatures, the more evaporation. So there's some sort of feedback loop there that's not being discussed with all of this business about carbon dioxide. Higher temperatures both help and hurt plants. There are optimum growing temperatures, but they vary from plant to plant. So if you have an optimum temperature for one type of plant, you won't have an optimum temperature for another type. Excessive heat stunts the plant growth and dries out the soil. So if you hear anybody bringing up these particular arguments, please post a link to this video and tell them they're full of nonsense. Thank you for watching, and until next time, stay safe and goodbye.